My bestie secretly whispered a jaw-dropping secret to me. Her husband had 2 cocks. As an oncologist, I immediately warned her that it was likely a tumor. If it wasn't surgically removed, it could turn into terminal cancer. Chloe scoffed at my advice. A tumor? Please, you're just jealous because you haven't seen it. Whatever. You're single and lonely, Avery. What would you know about a real man? But I kept nagging her out of love, and she finally agreed to take him to the hospital. The ultrasound confirmed it. It was indeed a malignant tumor. Who would have thought that after Garrett had the tumor removed, his sexual performance completely tanked? Chloe brainwashed her husband, telling him that I was the one who ruined their marital bliss. She knew you had a double package, Garrett. She was so jealous of me that she did this on purpose. Now you're useless in bed, and it's all her fault. A wicked bitch like her deserves to die. The next thing I knew, Garrett pushed me off the hospital's rooftop garden. I plummeted to my death. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the exact day Chloe came to me with her little secret. This time, I was going to mind my own business. Avery, come closer. Let me tell you something crazy. My husband is gifted. He literally has 2 cocks. I am the luckiest girl alive. When I finally processed what my bestie, Chloe, was saying, my pupils dilated in sheer horror. My back went stiff, cold sweat broke out across my neck, and my hands clenched into tight fists. Seeing my reaction, Chloe swatted my arm playfully, a smug, blushing grin plastered on her face. Look at you, completely speechless. Shocked, right? I was stunned too when I first found out. I'm only telling you because you're my bestie. Keep it on the down low, okay? Only this time, I noticed what I had missed in my past life. Underneath her fake modesty, Chloe's eyes were filled with bragging rights and deep satisfaction. My entire body was tense, my fists still clenched, and my breathing grew shallow. It wasn't because of her wild confession. It was because of the mind-blowing realization that I had been reborn. I was back to the day before all the tragedies started. In my past life, when she asked me out saying she had good news, I actually thought she was pregnant. I had even prepared a baby shower gift, only for her to brag about her husband's double anatomy. She had leaned in, vividly describing their bedroom activities in graphic detail. But as a doctor, red flags instantly went up in my head. Every organ in the human body has a specific function. It is biologically impossible to suddenly grow a duplicate organ out of nowhere. Besides, Garrett wasn't born with it. If it suddenly appeared, something was seriously wrong. Since we grew up together and I genuinely cared for her, I gave her my professional opinion. I suggested she take Garrett to a urologist immediately. If it was a tumor, early removal could save his life and prevent cancer. Instead of thanking me, Chloe's face turned incredibly sour. She made up a dozen excuses, insisting it was a genetic blessing. After that day, she slowly began to distance herself from me. I thought she was just being forgetful, so after my hospital shifts, I kept messaging her on Snapchat, desperately trying to persuade her. I even researched medical journals and sent her case studies of similar tumors. Eventually, she agreed to the checkup. The diagnosis was exactly what I feared, a tumor. Because I was an oncologist, she cried and said she only trusted me, begging me to be the lead surgeon. I felt so bad for her that I cleared my busy schedule, postponed other surgeries, and personally operated on her husband. But once Garrett recovered, his bedroom performance withered. Chloe lost her mind. She accused me of being jealous of her happiness and intentionally ruining her husband's manhood. She dragged Garrett to the hospital, screaming and staging protests to demand millions in malpractice compensation. And once they got their way, she lured me out under the pretense of a chat, only for Garrett to push me off the balcony when my guard was down. This time, I was done playing savior. Seeing that I hadn't responded for a long time, Chloe nudged me again. Avery, are you even listening to me? I wonder if it's a genetic thing in his family, to just grow another one at this age. Actually, Garrett has a younger brother, Gavin. If Gavin turns out to be just as gifted, want me to set you up? We are best friends after all. Ah yes, best friends. I sneered inwardly but kept a polite, slightly embarrassed smile on my face. No thanks. I'm not really into that. You know I'm happily single. Plus, my residency training is kicking into high gear, and I have to write a major research paper. I barely have time to sleep. Chloe sighed, looking disappointed. What a waste. But as a doctor, have you ever seen anything like this before? Like, could Garrett be sick or something? Think about it. How can a guy just grow a second one? So, she actually knew something was wrong. She was just testing me. I quickly waved my hand. I really wouldn't know. I'm in oncology, Chloe, not urology. I don't deal with genetic anomalies or male reproductive issues. Chloe stared at me thoughtfully. I see. Well, if you don't know, forget it. It's probably nothing anyway. Seeing that our food was gone, and remembering the chilling look of satisfaction on her face when I died in my past life, I couldn't stand being near her for another second. I made up an excuse about a hospital emergency and hurried out of the restaurant. Chloe and I had been friends since childhood, At least in my head. We were the kind of besties who shared everything. Her family was lower middle class, and her parents openly favored her deadbeat younger brother. Growing up in that toxic environment made Chloe insecure, sensitive, and timid. Because of her personality, she was a loner at school and became an easy target for bullies. I was different. I was an only child from a wealthy, loving family. Naturally, I was outgoing and confident. When I saw her being bullied, I stepped in to protect her. I helped her with her studies, shared my clothes, and introduced her to my circle of friends. Gradually, she blossomed. She became cheerful, lost her shyness, and made new friends. As we grew older, she constantly told me I was her favorite person and her life mentor. She said her biggest dream in life was to become a girl just like me. That was why I never suspected she could ever harbor such hatred towards me. But after experiencing death, I finally started questioning our entire friendship. Did Chloe ever actually feel grateful to me? Over the next few days, Chloe tried to invite me out several times. But I rejected her with every excuse in the book. To make my excuses look real, I didn't take a single day off. I practically lived at the hospital. The exhausting shifts actually comforted me. They reminded me that I was alive. However, despite my best efforts to ghost her, Chloe's mess still found its way to me. One evening, I logged into my professional Instagram account and saw a new comment on my latest post. A brand new account with a burner username from my local area had commented, "Dr. Avery, is it possible for a man to have two cocks? Or could it be a tumor?" I stared at the comment for a long time, my fingers hovering over the screen. As an oncologist, I often received medical questions from random netizens on Instagram. Usually, I would reply to them. But this time I froze. The username was completely anonymous, and the profile was blank. It was obvious. Someone had made a burner account specifically to bait me. I suddenly remembered that this had happened in my past life too. Back then, I hadn't thought about reminding Chloe again. But after seeing this comment, I immediately connected the dots. I replied to the user with my medical opinion, and then reached out to Chloe. I explained the risks and begged her to take Garrett to the hospital. Looking back, how many people in this city could possibly have such a rare medical condition? I had been so naive in my past life, thinking it was just another random patient. Now I realized the person behind that burner account was either Chloe or Garrett himself. Instead of replying, I posted a quick update, taking a social media break for an upcoming training seminar. Logging off. Then, I logged out of the app. I told myself I wouldn't touch my socials for the next few weeks. I managed to avoid her online, but I couldn't avoid her at work. Chloe showed up at my hospital. The moment I stepped out of the operating room, she rushed toward me, intercepting me in the hallway. "Avery, thank God I found you. I've been calling you nonstop, but your phone is dead. I really need your medical advice." My surgical assistant saw how pale and exhausted I was and immediately stepped in. Dr. Avery just finished a grueling 12-hour surgery after back-to-back prep meetings. She hasn't slept in over 20 hours. Perhaps you could schedule an appointment or come back tomorrow? Her words finally got through to Chloe. She glared at me, clearly annoyed, and sighed. Fine. Running away wasn't going to solve the problem forever. The fact that she had cornered me at my workplace meant I needed to take the offensive. The biggest question was, if Chloe already suspected Garrett had a tumor, why hadn't she taken him to a clinic yet? In my past life, they went to the hospital, which ultimately led to my death. In this life, I stepped back, yet she was still chasing me down. Unless she didn't just want Garrett gone. She wanted to drag me into it too. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Why would she hate me that much? Chloe had dropped out of college early and married Garrett, a blue-collar worker who worshipped the ground she walked on. Garrett was what older folks called a good honest man. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, and didn't cheat. But he was also broke. Shortly after they married, Chloe got pregnant and became a stay-at-home mom. With Garrett's sole, meager income, their lives were financially tight. Every time we met, she would complain about her boring, broke life. She complained that Garrett couldn't make real money, that they were living paycheck to paycheck, and she even talked about divorcing him. But lately, she had stopped complaining. She seemed to be in a fantastic mood. A few days ago, I even noticed she was wearing a brand new solid gold necklace. When I asked, she claimed Garrett had made some extra cash and bought it for her. I was highly suspicious. Having known Garrett for years, I knew he didn't have a romantic bone in his body, let alone the cash for luxury jewelry. Was Chloe seeing someone else? Now that the seed of doubt was planted, I decided to investigate. During my days off, I started keeping tabs on Chloe's daily routine. She was a housewife, and her son was already in elementary school. Her husband worked long hours, which left her with plenty of free time during the day. It didn't take long for me to catch her. One morning, after dropping her son off at school, she didn't head to the grocery store or go home to clean. Instead, she walked into a quiet alley, applied a bold red lipstick, and waited on a street corner. 10 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled up. Her face lit up with a brilliant smile, and she slid into the passenger seat. I quickly followed them in a rental car. I tracked them all the way to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. I watched them get out of the car, hand in hand, and walk inside. I snapped several clear photos of them together before parking nearby to wait. About 2 hours later, they walked out. Chloe's hair was slightly messy, and she looked thoroughly satisfied. They even shared a passionate kiss inside the car before he drove her back. I saved all the photos in a secure cloud folder. They were my insurance policy. But that wasn't all. Over the next month, I dug up another terrifying piece of information. Chloe had secretly taken out a massive accidental death insurance policy on Garrett. When I found out, my mind immediately raced to those horrific, spouse killing for insurance, true crime stories. She was clearly planning something sinister. To keep myself safe, I quietly terminated my apartment lease and moved to a secure condo with strict gated access, cutting off any chance of her cornering me at home. While Chloe stopped reaching out, 2 weeks later, Garrett messaged me on Snapchat. "Dr. Avery, are you free? There's something I want to ask you, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate." I didn't reply immediately. I let the message sit for 3 days before typing a cold response. "Garrett, you are Chloe's husband. If you think it's inappropriate, then it's best not to ask." Setting boundaries with a bestie's husband was the smartest thing to do. Fortunately, my coldness worked, and he didn't text back. But almost immediately after I sent that message, Chloe called me. Realizing I had just been active online, I had no choice but to pick up. "Hey Chloe, what's up?" Chloe's voice sounded panicked. "Avery, remember what I told you about Garrett's, his extra part? He says it's starting to hurt really badly. I'm scared something is wrong." My heart sank. She was trying to bait me into giving medical advice again. As a doctor, I gave advice to hundreds of patients, and they were always grateful. Even if they didn't like the diagnosis, they never blamed me personally. But Chloe wasn't a normal patient. She was a ticking time bomb. I had to be incredibly careful with my words. "I really can't say, Chloe. Like I told you, I'm not a urologist, so I don't know much about that area. Maybe you guys are just keeping too busy at night?" I joked lightly, trying to keep the mood casual. "You should talk to Garrett and see what he wants to do." Right then, a nurse knocked on my office door. I quickly called out to her and turned back to the phone. "Chloe, I have to go. An emergency patient just came in, and we need to prep for surgery. I'll call you back later." Without waiting for her reply, I hung up. After a grueling 6-hour surgery, I was completely drained. I went back to my office to change, only to find Chloe and Garrett standing right outside my door. The young nurse looked terrified. "Dr. Avery," I tried to stop them, but they just pushed past me. I waved my hand. "It's fine. Go get some rest." I knew that even if the nurse stopped them today, Chloe would just find another way to corner me tomorrow. Once the nurse left, Chloe plopped down on my office sofa. "Avery, what am I supposed to do?" She burst into tears, covering her face. Garrett stood beside her, his face dark and silent, looking incredibly stressed. I stood there, watching her cry without offering any comfort. Seeing that her tears weren't getting a reaction out of me, Chloe stopped acting and grabbed an envelope from Garrett's hand, tossing the scan results onto my desk. "Avery, I know you're the best doctor in this hospital. After Garrett's pain got unbearable, we went to get him checked. Look at this." She tapped her finger on the diagnosis line, her voice cracking with fake sorrow. "The doctor said it's a tumor. It's not a second cock, and he needs surgery immediately." But I looked it up online. People say it could be chimerism. You know what that is, right? It's when one twin absorbs the other in the womb. That means it could still be a second part. But the doctor insisted. "Avery, I only trust you. You're the top oncologist here. Your face is literally on the hospital's wall of fame. Since we're best friends, you have to perform the surgery." I stared at the scan on my desk, my face completely expressionless. The black and white cross-section of Garrett's pelvis was horrifyingly clear. Nestled right between his bladder and his femoral plexus was a massive, lobulated tissue mass, a retroperitoneal liposarcoma. It was growing, aggressively, pushing outward into his perineum, creating the visible bulge that Chloe had so foolishly romanticized as a second cock. It was invading the surrounding cavernous nerves, the very nerve pathways responsible for male erectile function. "Well, Dr. Avery?" Chloe pressed, leaning over my desk, her cheap perfume suffocating the small room. "You see it, right? You can just slice it out. You're a surgeon. It'll take you what, 2 hours?" Garrett shifted uncomfortably beside her. He looked at me with a mixture of embarrassment, fear, and a strange, stubborn pride that made my stomach turn. "Dr. Avery," Garrett mumbled, his voice tight. Is it really a tumor?" Chloe said maybe my body just developed extra tissue, like a twin. I looked at him, then at Chloe. In my past life, I would have painstakingly pulled out anatomical diagrams, explained the biology of retroperitoneal tumors, and held their hands through the terror of a cancer diagnosis. Today, I pulled the scan out of the envelope and slid it right back across the desk, I can't take this case, I said flatly. Chloe's fake tears vanished instantly. Her eyebrows pulled together in a sharp, accusatory V. What? What do you mean you can't take it? You're an oncologist. Hospital Ethics Policy Section 4, I replied smoothly, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. Physicians are strictly prohibited from performing major surgical procedures on immediate family members or close personal friends. It's a direct conflict of interest. We're best friends. Chloe spat, her voice rising an octave. That's why you should do it. Who else am I supposed to trust with my husband's manhood? And that exact emotional pressure is why the medical board forbids it, I answered, keeping my tone crisp, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. If there are complications, and with a deep pelvic mass, there are always potential complications. My professional judgment could be compromised by our personal relationship. Complications. Garrett's face went white. What kind of complications? Nerve damage, massive hemorrhage, permanent loss of organ function, or infection, I listed casually, watching Garrett's jaw drop. Which is why you need a dedicated urological oncologist. Not me. Chloe slammed her hand down on my desk. Avery, don't give me that bureaucratic crap. You just don't want to help us. Are you afraid you'll mess up? Or are you just looking down on Garrett because he's a blue-collar worker? There it was. The classic Chloe trap. She was trying to provoke me, trying to frame my refusal as arrogance or elitism, so she could use it against me later. I didn't bite. I pulled open my desk drawer, pulled out a formal referral pad and wrote down a name and clear, precise script. Dr. Harrison, I said, placing the slip in front of Garrett. He is the head of urological oncology at this hospital. He has 30 years of experience and has performed over 2,000 complex pelvic resections. He is objectively the best surgeon in the state for this specific condition. I looked Garrett straight in the eyes. If you want to live, Garrett, you will. Let Dr. Harrison handle your case. I am recusing myself from your medical care. Entirely. Garrett looked at the referral slip, then at me. He could hear the absolute finality in my voice. He picked up the paper. Garrett, don't take that. Chloe hissed, grabbing his arm. She's brushing us off. Chloe, shut up. Garrett snapped, his nerves finally snapping. She said it's a tumor. It's hurting like hell every time I walk. I want a real specialist. Chloe froze, shocked by her husband's sudden outburst. She glared at me, her eyes burning with a dark, toxic rage that she couldn't quite hide. She realized her first trap had failed. I hadn't taken the bait. I wasn't going to be the surgeon holding the scalpel when Garrett's manhood was destroyed. Fine, Chloe hissed through clenched teeth. We'll see Dr. Harrison. But if anything goes wrong, Avery, I'm holding you responsible for pushing us away. I have logged this consultation in the hospital's electronic record system. I said, pointing to my computer screen with a faint, cold smile, including my formal recusal and referral to Dr. Harrison. Have a good evening. 2 weeks later, Garrett was admitted to the surgical wing under Dr. Harrison's care. I made sure I was nowhere near the 9th floor. I adjusted my rotation schedule, so I was working exclusively in the pediatric oncology ward on the 3rd floor, keeping myself surrounded by nurses, senior attending physicians, and security cameras at all times. Every step I took was documented. Every chart I signed had a timestamp. On the day of Garrett's surgery, I sat in the hospital cafeteria on the ground floor, drinking black coffee with 2 senior residents. Did you hear about Harrison's case today? One of the residents asked, taking a bite of his sandwich. That retroperitoneal liposarcoma in room 904? Yeah, the second resident chimed in. I saw the pre-op imaging. The mass was massive. It wrapped right around the hypogastric plexus. Harrison had to strip the nerves right off the pelvic floor to get clean margins. Dreadful. The first resident shook his head. The guy survived, but his sexual function is completely shot. Total neurological severance. He'll never have an erection again. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The bitter taste washed over my tongue, but inside, a cold sense of relief bloomed. It had happened, just like in my past life. The tumor was gone, saving Garrett's life from metastatic cancer, but his physical capability as a man was permanently destroyed. In my past life, Chloe had dragged Garrett to my office 3 weeks after the surgery, screaming that I had mutilated her husband out of jealousy. She had convinced Garrett that I deliberately cut his nerves because I couldn't stand seeing Chloe happy with a gifted man. Now Dr. Harrison was the surgeon. Dr. Harrison was a 62-year-old medical giant with an army of hospital lawyers behind him. I wondered how Chloe was going to spin this now. I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, as I was walking toward the parking garage, a shrill scream echoed across the main lobby. Where is she? Where is Dr. Avery? I stopped behind a thick marble pillar near the central fountain, keeping myself out of sight. Chloe was standing near the information desk, her hair wild, her face red and blotchy with tears. She was holding a stack of medical papers, waving them frantically at the terrified receptionist. Garrett was sitting in a wheelchair beside her, his face pale, his eyes hollow and dead, staring blankly at the floor. "Ma'am, please calm down." A security guard stepped forward, raising his hands. "Dr. Harrison was the lead surgeon on your husband's case." "Dr. Harrison is a butcher," Chloe screamed, her voice echoing off the glass atrium. "But Avery is the one who set us up. She delayed his diagnosis. She knew what was wrong with him months ago and kept quiet because she was jealous of us." My blood ran cold. She was pivoting. Since she couldn't accuse me of surgical malpractice, she was trying to accuse me of delayed diagnosis and willful negligence. She told me it was nothing. Chloe shrieked, tears streaming down her cheeks as she put on a masterclass performance for the gathering crowd of visitors and patients. She told me Garrett just had a genetic trait. She let the tumor grow until it destroyed his nerves. She ruined my husband. I felt a surge of white-hot anger, but I didn't rush out. I reached into my coat, pulled out my phone, and hit record. I filmed her performance from behind the pillar, capturing every hysterical lie spilling from her mouth. "Ma'am," the security supervisor walked over, his tone stern. "We have the electronic medical records. Dr. Avery never treated your husband prior to 2 weeks ago, at which point she immediately referred him to Dr. Harrison. If you continue to cause a disturbance, we will have you removed for harassment." "You're all protecting her," Chloe screamed, grabbing Garrett's wheelchair handles. "She's a rich, spoiled doctor who thinks she can play with poor people's lives. I'm going to sue this hospital. I'm going to ruin her." Garrett didn't say a word. He just sat in the wheelchair, looking utterly broken, letting his wife drag him around like a puppet. I stood in the shadows, watching them be escorted out by security. Chloe hadn't changed. She didn't care about Garrett's health. She didn't care about the truth. She wanted money, she wanted revenge for her own bitter, pathetic life, and, above all, she wanted to drag me down into the gutter with her. Over the next week, Chloe launched a full-scale smear campaign against me. Online, she created anonymous accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and local community forums, posting my professional headshot alongside wild, fabricated stories. Dr. Avery, the cold-blooded oncologist who let my husband suffer out of pure envy. Beware of this doctor at the City General. She neglects patients who aren't wealthy. The hospital's public relations department called me into a meeting on Thursday morning. The chief of surgery, Dr. Vance, sat at the head of the conference table, looking over a printed stack of the online posts. "Avery," Dr. Vance said, rubbing his temples. "This woman is creating a massive public relations headache. The board is concerned. Did you have any informal consultations with her before her husband was officially admitted?" "No, sir," I answered cleanly. I opened my briefcase, pulled out a neat, tabbed folder, and laid it on the table. Inside were 1. Printed Snapchat logs showing Garrett's unsolicited message to me and my immediate, firm refusal to discuss medical matters privately. 2. The recording of our phone call, where I explicitly told Chloe I was not a urologist and instructed her to seek professional care. 3. The official consultation log from 2 weeks ago, showing my immediate referral to Dr. Harrison. 4. The video recording I had taken of Chloe's public outburst in the lobby. Dr. Vance scanned the documents, his expression shifting from concern to impressed. "You documented everything," Dr. Vance noted. "I am an oncologist, Dr. Vance," I said calmly. "I know how dangerous unhinged individuals can be when faced with difficult medical realities. I protected myself and the hospital's reputation from day one." "Excellent work," Dr. Vance nodded, closing the folder. "Our legal team will issue a formal cease and desist letter to Mrs. Chloe Miller immediately. If she continues, we will file charges for defamation and criminal harassment." I smiled politely. "Thank you, Dr. Vance." Leaving the administration office, I knew a cease and desist wouldn't stop Chloe. Fear of the law only works on people who have something to lose. Chloe had nothing, except her insatiable greed. It was time to pull out my winning card. I returned to my office, locked the door, and opened the secure cloud folder on my laptop. I pulled up the photos I had taken a month ago. Chloe entering the cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, hand in hand with a tall, sleek man in a tailored suit. Chloe kissing him inside the black sedan. I had spent the last 2 weeks using a private investigator to identify the man in those photos. His name was Marcus Vance, no relation to my chief of surgery. He was a sleazy local real estate developer who specialized in flipping foreclosed properties and laundering money through shell companies. More importantly, Marcus was heavily in debt to local loan sharks. And even more importantly, Chloe had taken out a $2 million accidental death and disability policy on Garrett 3 months ago, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. The puzzle pieces fit together with terrifying clarity. Chloe hadn't just wanted Garrett's tumor removed. She had wanted Garrett dead on the operating table, or so severely compromised that she could push him into an accidental death later to collect the $2 million. She had tried to use me as her executioner. If I had performed the surgery in my past life, she would have tampered with Garrett's post-op care, killed him, blamed my jealousy for the medical failure, sued the hospital for millions, and walked away with both the insurance money and the malpractice settlement. My spine turned to ice as the horror of my past life fully washed over me. In my past life, Garrett hadn't pushed me off the roof because he was angry about his manhood. Chloe had convinced Garrett that I was the monster who ruined his life, manipulating his broken, desperate state until he became her disposable murder weapon, eliminating the one person, me, who could have pointed out the suspicious nature of Garrett's medical history. "You sick, brilliant bitch," I whispered to the empty room. She hadn't just murdered me. She had made her husband do it, ensuring that even if Garrett got caught for my murder, she would walk away clean, rich, and single. A dark, cold smile spread across my face. "Not this time, Chloe," I murmured. "This time, you're going to consume yourself." 3 days later, Garrett was readmitted to the hospital's emergency department. The call came through my desk intercom while I was reviewing radiation charts. "Dr. Avery, we have an emergency transfer in trauma room 2. Severe retroperitoneal hemorrhage and acute liver failure. It's Garrett Miller." I stood up immediately. "I'm on my way." When I reached trauma room 2, the scene was chaotic. Garrett was lying on the gurney, his skin a terrifying shade of ash gray, vomiting dark, digested blood into a plastic basin. His blood pressure monitor was screaming, 70/40. Chloe was standing in the corner, holding a handkerchief to her eyes, sobbing hysterically. "Save him. Please, somebody save my husband," she wailed to the attending nurses. "He was doing so well at home. He just took his recovery meds this morning and started bleeding." Dr. Harrison rushed into the room, his face pale. "What happened?" "His post-op vascular checks were clean 3 days ago. Disseminated intravascular coagulation? A resident guest? Or a delayed arterial rupture from the surgical bed?" I stood near the door, my eyes fixed on Chloe. She was crying, yes, but her fingers were tightly clutching her designer handbag. Her eyes weren't fixed on her dying husband. They kept darting toward the heart monitor, watching the oxygen saturation numbers drop. 85%, 82%, 78%. She was waiting for him to flatline. "Dr. Harrison." I stepped forward, my voice sharp and loud enough to command the room. "Order an immediate toxicology screen and a full coagulation factor panel. Specifically, check for heavy Coumadin or warfarin toxicity." Dr. Harrison blinked, surprised. "Warfarin? He wasn't prescribed blood thinners." "Look at his petechiae." I pointed to the small purple bruise spots rashing across Garrett's neck and arms. "That's not surgical bleeding. That's acute rat poison or high-dose anticoagulant toxicity." Chloe's crying stopped dead in its tracks. She whipped her head toward me, her eyes filled with pure, unadulterated terror. "What are you talking about? Are you saying I poisoned my husband? How dare you accuse me?" "I didn't mention your name, Chloe," I said smoothly, stepping into the light of the trauma bay. "Why are you so defensive?" I. Chloe's lips trembled, her face going completely white. "I'm his wife. I've been giving him his prescribed vitamins every morning." "Vitamins?" Dr. Harrison snapped, his eyes darkening as he caught on. "Nurse, draw the blood for a full tox screen right now. Call the ICU for an emergency. Vitamin K and fresh frozen plasma transfusion." The trauma team moved with lightning speed. Within 10 minutes, Garrett was stabilized, his blood pressure brought back from the brink of fatal shock by emergency plasma infusions. Chloe stood in the corner of the room, shivering, looking like a rat trapped in a corner. She realized her window was closing. If Garrett survived the night and the toxicology report came back positive for warfarin, the police would be at her door before sunrise. She needed a fall guy. And she needed one right now. As the medical team wheeled Garrett toward the intensive care unit, Chloe suddenly lunged toward me. "It was you," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "You visited our house yesterday. You dropped off that recovery basket. You put something in his medicine." The nurses and security guards gasped, looking between us. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen 3 times, and turned it toward Dr. Harrison and the security guards. "Yesterday," I said calmly, "I was performing a 7-hour pancreatectomy at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital across town as a guest surgeon. My presence there is logged on 3 hospital security cameras and verified by 12 surgical staff members. I looked at Chloe, my eyes burning with absolute, chilling contempt. Furthermore, Chloe, I think it's time we talk about Marcus Vance. The name Marcus Vance hit Chloe like a physical blow. Her eyes dilated, her jaw dropped, and every drop of color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a corpse. I don't know who that is, she stammered, her voice cracking pathetically. You don't know the man you've been visiting at the Starlight Motel 3 times a week? I asked, my voice carrying clearly through the hallway. The man who helped you take out a $2 million accidental death policy on Garrett 3 months ago. The security guards immediately closed in around Chloe, sensing the sudden shift from a medical emergency to a crime scene. You're crazy, Chloe shrieked, backing away toward the wall. She's lying. She's making things up because she hates me. The police are already reviewing the hotel surveillance footage, Chloe. I lied smoothly, taking a slow step toward her. And Dr. Harrison has already secured Garrett's blood samples. In 2 hours, the lab will confirm the exact compound used to poison your husband. Chloe looked around the room. The nurses were staring at her with disgust. The security guards had their hands near their holsters. She was completely surrounded. Her grand plan, her $2 million payday, her new life with Marcus, her pathetic attempt to destroy me, was crumbling into dust. She let out a wild animalistic scream, shoved past a nurse and sprinted down the hallway toward the emergency exit. Security, stop her! Dr. Harrison yelled. 2 guards gave chase immediately, their heavy boots thudding against the linoleum. I didn't run after her. I didn't need to. I walked calmly into the ICU wing, where Garrett had been transferred to a private isolation room. Garrett was awake. The plasma transfusion had restored his blood volume, but he was weak, his eyes hollow as he stared at the 4 lines hooked to his arm. He had heard everything. The trauma bay curtains were thin, and Chloe's frantic screaming had echoed through the entire unit. I stepped into his room and closed the door behind me, blocking out the noise of the hospital. Garrett turned his head slowly, looking at me. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes, trailing down his pale, sunken cheeks. Dr. Avery, he croaked, his voice raw. Is it true? I pulled a chair over to his bedside and sat down. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were the printed photographs of Chloe and Marcus, along with a copy of the life insurance document my private investigator had unearthed. I laid them gently on his tray table. Look for yourself, Garrett, I said softly. Garrett's trembling, bruised fingers reached out. He picked up the photos one by one. He saw his wife, the woman he had worshipped, the woman he had worked 80 hours a week to support, the woman he had defended against everyone, smiling brilliantly into another man's face, kissing him outside a cheap motel. He saw his own forged signature on the $2 million life insurance policy. Garrett choked, a terrible, heartbroken sob tearing from his chest. She told me you were the enemy, Avery. She told me you ruined my body because you were jealous of us. She used your insecurity, Garrett, I said, my voice cold, precise, and unyielding. She knew you were terrified of losing your manhood. She manipulated your pride so you would hate me, while she quietly fed you blood thinners to make sure you never woke up. Garrett squeezed his eyes shut, weeping uncontrollably, his entire body shaking against the hospital bed. Why? He wailed. Why would she do this to me? I gave her everything. I bought her that gold necklace. I took extra shifts until my back bled. Because to Chloe, I answered, standing up from my chair, people aren't human beings. They're props. You were her meal ticket, and I was the girl she wanted to surpass. I looked down at the broken man lying in the bed. In my past life, this man had shoved me off a 6-story building, watching me fall to my death with eyes full of brainwashed hatred. Today, he was nothing more than a pathetic, dying witness to his own destruction. The police are going to want a statement from you, Garrett, I said, adjusting my lab coat. I suggest you tell them everything. An hour later, the hospital was placed on partial lockdown. Chloe hadn't made it out of the building. When the security guards chased her into the parking garage, she had panicked, ran back inside through a side service entrance, and taken the elevator up to the top floor, the roof. History was repeating itself. When Dr. Harrison informed me that Chloe was standing on the edge of the 6th-floor rooftop garden, demanding to speak to me, I felt no shock. I felt a cold, sharp sense of fate. Dr. Avery, don't go up there, the lead police officer, Detective Miller, warned me in the stairwell. She's unhinged. She's threatening to jump, and she's claiming you pushed her into a corner. I have to go, Detective, I said calmly, pulling a small, wireless microphone out of my pocket, and clipping it discreetly to the inside of my collar. She wants an audience. If I don't give it to her, she might try to take someone else. Down with her. We'll be right behind the service door, Detective Miller whispered, motioning to 3 armed officers behind him. The second she makes a threatening move, we step in. I nodded, pushed open the heavy metal door, and stepped out onto the rooftop garden. The night air was cold, snapping against my face. The city lights blazed below us, stretching out like a sea of scattered diamonds. Chloe was standing near the low concrete perimeter wall, the exact same spot where Garrett had cornered me in my past life. Her hair was a wild mess, her makeup smeared across her face. She was clutching a heavy metal oxygen wrench she had grabbed from a maintenance cart. When she heard the door click, she whipped around. "Avery," she shrieked, her voice frantic, hysterical, completely insane. "You bitch. You ruined everything." I stopped 10 feet away from her, keeping my hands visible, my stance relaxed. "I didn't ruin anything, Chloe," I said cleanly. "You did this to yourself." "Liar," she spat, tears streaming down her face as she gestured wildly with the wrench. "You had everything. You were born rich. Your parents loved you. You got into medical school. You became a respected doctor. Everyone looked up to you." Her voice cracked, filled with 20 years of festering, toxic envy. "And what did I have? A deadbeat family. A broke husband who couldn't even buy me a decent house. I hated you, Avery. Every time you smiled at me, every time you gave me your old clothes, I wanted to rip your pretty face off." I stood there, listening to the dark, ugly truth spilling from her mouth. The friendship I had cherished for 15 years was nothing more than a parasite's obsession. "So you decided to murder Garrett for $2 million? I asked, my voice amplified clearly through the wire on my collar. "You poisoned his food with warfarin. He was useless anyway," Chloe screamed, laughing maniacally. "His manhood was gone. He was a broke, crippled loser. Taking his life was doing him a favor. Marcus and I were going to take that money and buy a villa in Spain." She took a step toward me, raising the heavy iron wrench. "And you had to ruin it. You wouldn't take the surgery. You wouldn't let me frame you. If you had just died when you were supposed to, everything would be perfect. If you had just died when you were supposed to." My eyes narrowed. She didn't mean it metaphorically. She was talking about her twisted vision of reality. "You really thought you could get away with it?" I asked softly. "I can still get away with it." Chloe grinned, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "I'm going to hit you with this wrench, throw you over the edge, and tell the police you tried to push me. They'll think you committed suicide out of guilt for letting my husband get poisoned." She raised the iron wrench high, lunging toward me with all her weight. In my past life, I was caught off guard, overwhelmed by Garrett's physical strength, unable to fight back. This time I was ready. As Chloe swung the heavy wrench, I stepped neatly to the left, sidestepping her sloppy top-heavy charge. Her momentum carried her forward. Her knees slammed into the low concrete perimeter wall. The wrench flew from her hand, clattering across the gravel roof. Chloe lost her balance, pitching forward over the low ledge, her arms flailing wildly in the empty air 6 stories above the street. "Aha! Avery, help me!" she shrieked in absolute terror. Her fingers caught the rough concrete edge of the wall, barely hanging on. Her body dangled over the abyss, the city lights swirling below her feet. I walked over slowly, stopping right above her. I looked down at her terrified face, at her tears, at her white knuckles slipping on the rough stone. "Avery, please," she sobbed, her pride completely shattered, begging like a dog. "We're best friends. Save me. Please don't let me fall. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I reached down, my hand hovering inches from her slipping fingers. For a second, the memory of my past life flashed before my eyes, the cold wind rushing past my ears, the terrifying impact of the concrete, the absolute darkness of death. I could have walked away. I could have let her fingers slip. It would have been self-defense. But I wasn't a murderer. And letting her die was too easy. Death was an escape. Living with her own ruin was her true punishment. I grabbed her wrist in a tight, iron grip, anchoring her against the wall. "I'm not saving you because we're friends, Chloe," I whispered, leaning down so only she could hear me. "I'm saving you so you can spend the next 30 years in a concrete cell, thinking about the life you threw away." Before she could comprehend my words, the rooftop door flew open. Detective Miller and 3 armed officers rushed across the roof, grabbing Chloe's arms and hauling her trembling, sobbing body back over the wall, slamming her onto the gravel in handcuffs. "Chloe Miller," Detective Miller barked, snapping the steel cuffs onto her wrists. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and criminal poisoning. You have the right to remain silent." Chloe was dragged away, weeping, screaming, her face filthy with dirt and tears. I stood on the edge of the roof, the cold wind blowing through my lab coat, watching her disappear behind the metal door. The aftermath was swift and absolute. The toxicology reports confirmed lethal levels of warfarin in Garrett's system, directly traced to the vitamin capsules Chloe had been feeding him daily. Search warrants executed at Marcus Vance's residence uncovered forged insurance documents, text messages discussing Garrett's murder, and half-empty bottles of industrial-grade blood thinners. Marcus Vance was arrested 24 hours later, singing like a canary to the prosecutors to save himself from a life sentence. 6 months later, the trial concluded. Chloe Miller was convicted on all counts: attempted capital murder, first degree, poisoning, insurance fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Because of the premeditated, heinous nature of her crimes, she was sentenced to 35 years in a maximum security state penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Garrett Miller survived, though his physical health was permanently altered. He sold his small apartment, paid off his medical debts, and left the city, quietly, moving to a small rural town in the West. He never reached out to me again, too ashamed to ever look me in the eye. As for me, my life finally belonged to me. With the threat eliminated and my name completely vindicated, my career soared. My oncology research paper on early-stage retroperitoneal tumor detection was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, receiving national acclaim. At 32, I was promoted to Associate Chief of Surgical Oncology at City General Hospital, becoming the youngest physician in the hospital's history to hold the title. Epilogue. It was a bright, crisp autumn morning. I stood on the rooftop garden of the hospital, holding a warm cup of coffee. The low concrete wall where Chloe had dangled was now lined with bright, blooming yellow marigolds, a gift from the hospital's landscape committee to brighten the staff lounge area. The wind was cool, carrying the fresh scent of pine and distant rain. My phone chimed in my pocket. It was a message from my surgical team, letting me know our next patient was prepped and ready in operating room 4. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the warm liquid slide down my throat, feeling the steady, strong rhythm of my heart beating inside my chest. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor who had rewritten her own destiny. I turned around, walked past the heavy metal door, and stepped back into the bright, sunlit hallway of my life.